At 7:42 on the morning of December 3, 1944, a train ground to a halt at Camp McCoy, Wisconsin. Steam hissed from the engine. Ice crystals hung in the air. The temperature was 14 degrees below zero, and 847 Japanese prisoners of war sat inside cattle cars that had been converted for human transport, waiting for doors that would open onto a world they had been taught did not exist. Sergeant Hideo Tanaka was 23 years old. He weighed 97 pounds. His uniform hung from his shoulders like cloth draped over a wire frame. He had been captured on Saipan 4 months earlier after spending 19 days hiding in a cave system above Marpy Point, eating roots and drinking rainwater collected in his helmet. When American Marines found him, he was too weak to stand. He expected them to shoot him. Instead, they gave him a canteen and a chocolate bar. He ate the chocolate so fast, he vomited. The Marines waited, then gave him another one. Now Tanaka sat in the frozen rail car, listening to the crunch of boots on snow outside. The doors groaned open, cold air rushed in like a blade, and with it came a smell that made no sense. Rich, fatty, warm. Something was cooking nearby, something with meat. The prisoners filed out onto frozen ground. Their breath hung in white clouds. Guards shouted commands in English, pointing toward a row of wooden buildings. Smoke curled from chimneys. The smell grew stronger. One prisoner whispered to Tanaka, "This is the trap. They fatten us before the torture begins." Tanaka said nothing. He had stopped believing anything weeks ago. The intake process at Camp McCoy followed procedures established by the Geneva Convention and refined through 2 years of operating prisoner camps across the American Midwest. Each prisoner was photographed, fingerprinted, and assigned a number. Medical examinations followed. Real examinations. Doctors checked eyes, ears, throats. They listened to hearts and lungs. They inspected wounds and treated infections. A dentist examined Tanaka's teeth. The man wore wire-rimmed glasses and spoke through an interpreter. 3 cavities. We'll fill them next week. Tanaka stared at him. In Japan, dental care was reserved for officers. Here, enemy prisoners received it as routine. The delousing came next. Prisoners stripped and walked through chemical showers while their uniforms were burned. New clothes were issued. American military surplus, cotton underwear, wool trousers, flannel shirts, leather boots that actually fit. Private Kenji Yamamoto, captured during the same operation on Saipan, looked down at his new boots with something approaching terror. "These are better than what our officers wore," he said. "What does this mean?" It meant America had resources to spare. It meant the propaganda films showing a collapsing American economy were lies. It meant everything they had been told about their enemy was wrong. But the full weight of that realization would not hit until the next morning. Until breakfast. The mess hall at Camp McCoy was a long wooden building with low ceilings and rows of tables bolted to the floor. It could seat 400 men at a time. At 06:30, the first group of Japanese prisoners filed through the doors, tin trays clutched like shields against their chests. Steam rose from serving stations along the back wall. American cooks stood behind the counters, sleeves rolled to elbows, faces bored with routine. The smell was overwhelming. Grease, salt. Char from a grill that had been running since 0500. Tanaka moved through the line in a daze. A cook dropped something onto his tray, round, brown, sandwiched between 2 pieces of soft bread. Grease glistened on its surface. Next came fried potatoes, golden and crisp. Then a glass bottle with a red label. Coca-Cola. Tanaka had never seen it before. He had never heard the name. "Move along," the cook said flatly. Tanaka shuffled to a table and sat down. Around him, other prisoners stared at their trays with expressions that ranged from suspicion to naked hunger. Nobody ate. They waited. For what? They didn't know. For guards to snatch the food away. For someone to announce this was a test. For the punishment to begin. Private Yamamoto lifted the glass bottle and sniffed it. Then he took a sip. The carbonation burned his throat. The sweetness exploded across his tongue. He coughed, gasped, then laughed. A short, involuntary sound that startled everyone at the table. Tanaka picked up the hamburger with both hands. Grease ran down his wrists. He brought it to his mouth and bit down slowly, as though the act might break some spell. The flavor was unlike anything he had experienced in 2 years. Salt, fat, the char of open flame. His jaw ached from chewing, his stomach cramped from the richness. He kept eating. Across the table, an older prisoner named Corporal Masao Ito lowered his head over his tray. His shoulders shook. Tears dripped onto the fried potatoes. The man next to him asked if he was all right. Ito lifted his face. His cheeks were wet. "I had forgotten," he said quietly. "I had forgotten the taste of fat." The mess hall fell into strange silence. Men ate with their heads bowed, chewing slowly, processing not just food but information. This was not a feast. This was not propaganda. This was Tuesday breakfast. The Americans ate like this every day. Tanaka finished his hamburger and drank the Coca-Cola. The sweetness made his teeth ache. He thought of his mother in Hiroshima, surviving on rationed grain and boiled vegetables. He thought of his younger brother somewhere in the Philippines, if he was still alive, eating whatever scraps he could find. And he thought of the shame, the deep, crawling shame of eating better as a prisoner than he ever had as a soldier. When the meal ended, prisoners filed back to their barracks in silence. That night, lying on a cot under a wool blanket, Tanaka heard a voice from across the room. "What do you think your family eats tonight?" Nobody answered. There was only the sound of breathing and the wind scraping against the walls. The routine at Camp McCoy settled in over the following weeks like snow accumulating on frozen ground. Wake at 0600, roll call at 0630, breakfast at 0700, work detail from 0800 to 1200, lunch, more work until 1700, dinner, free time until lights out at 2100. The schedule was predictable, the food was consistent, the guards did not beat them. Tanaka was assigned to a road-clearing crew. The work was cold and steady, shoveling snow from access roads that connected the camp to surrounding farms. At the end of each week, he was paid in camp coupons. With them, he could buy toiletries at the canteen, writing paper, stamps, chocolate bars. The first time he held a chocolate bar, his hands trembled. In Japan, chocolate was medicine, reserved for the sick and wounded. Here, it was sold like bread. He broke off a piece and let it melt on his tongue. The sweetness was almost painful. He wrapped the rest carefully and hid it under his mattress. English classes were offered in the evenings. Attendance was voluntary. Tanaka was one of 34 prisoners who showed up the first night. The teacher was an American sergeant named Robert Collins, 28 years old, former high school English instructor from Minnesota. He wrote simple words on a chalkboard: bread, table, window, family. Tanaka copied each word into a notebook. He repeated them under his breath. The word family stuck in his throat. He hadn't received a letter from home yet. The Red Cross was still processing mail. He didn't know if his mother was alive. He didn't know if Hiroshima still stood. One evening, Collins wrote a sentence on the board: "I miss my family." He asked Tanaka to read it aloud. Tanaka did, his accent thick, his voice barely above a whisper. Collins nodded. "Good. We all miss someone." Tanaka looked down at his notebook. For the first time since his capture, he felt something other than shame. He felt seen. But not all encounters were kind. On a work detail outside the camp, an American farmer watched the prisoners with cold eyes. His son had been killed on Guadalcanal. When a prisoner bent to retrieve a dropped shovel, the farmer spat on the ground near his feet. "Should have left them to starve," the man muttered loud enough for everyone to hear. The guard escorted the crew back to camp without comment. That night, prisoners debated the incident in low voices. "Not all Americans follow their rules," one said. "Of course not," another replied. "They are men like us. Some will hate, some will not." The truth was more complicated than either side. American policy toward Japanese prisoners was governed by the Geneva Convention, but policy and practice were different things. Some guards treated prisoners with professional detachment, others showed genuine kindness. A few harbored hatred they couldn't hide. A young guard named Private Thomas Miller sometimes lingered near the fence after his shift ended. He carried photographs of his family. 2 sisters, maybe 8 and 10 years old, smiling in Sunday dresses. A mother with graying hair. A father in overalls standing beside a tractor. Miller showed these photographs to prisoners who gathered on the other side of the wire. They couldn't understand his words, but they understood the faces. Family was universal. Tanaka traced a shape in the dirt one afternoon. A small house, a tree, a woman standing in the doorway. Miller crouched down and pointed at the drawing. "Mother?" Tanaka touched his chest. "Ha ha ha," he said softly. The Japanese word. Miller smiled. Another guard called him away, but the moment had happened. 2 enemies had found common ground in the snow. Inside the barracks, tensions simmered beneath the surface. Some prisoners warned against softening. Every kind word is a trap, they argued. Every smile weakens your spirit. They cited Bushido. They invoked the emperor. They reminded everyone that surrender itself was shameful, and accepting comfort from the enemy compounded that shame. Arguments flared at night. One man accused another of betraying Japan by attending English classes. The accused shot back, "What does honor matter if we do not survive to return home?" Nobody had an answer. Tanaka lay awake most nights, staring at the ceiling beams. He thought of the hamburger, the Coca-Cola, the chocolate bar hidden under his pillow. He thought of Miller's photographs. And he thought of the contradiction that gnawed at him constantly. His enemy had fed him, healed him, treated him with more care than his own commanders ever had. What did that mean? He didn't know. But the question followed him everywhere. By spring of 1945, rumors filtered into the camp like water through cracks. Tokyo was burning. American B-29s were hitting city after city, night after night. Incendiary bombs were turning wooden neighborhoods into infernos. The Philippines had fallen. Iwo Jima had fallen. Okinawa was under siege. Prisoners gathered in tight circles, whispering the news. Some clung to hope. "Japan will never surrender," they insisted. "We will fight to the last man. The divine wind will save us." Others had stopped believing. Tanaka was one of them. He had seen the American factories from the train windows during his transfer. Assembly lines producing trucks, jeeps, artillery pieces. He had eaten their food, worn their clothes, watched their supply convoys roll through camp every day without interruption. He had done the math in his head, not with numbers, but with his senses. This nation did not hunger. It did not ration. It did not scrape by. It overflowed. One afternoon, during a work detail, Tanaka stood beside an American truck loaded with crates of Coca-Cola. Thousands of bottles packed in ice, heading to military bases across the Midwest. He stared at them, calculating. If America could afford to give soda to prisoners of war, what did that say about the outcome of this conflict? A guard noticed him staring. "Crazy, huh?" the guard said casually. "We got enough Coke to drown the whole Pacific." Tanaka didn't understand the words, but he understood the tone. Casual, confident, abundant. That night he wrote in his notebook, "I believed Japan was the center of the world. Now I see we are only one small island." He hid the notebook under his mattress. If anyone found it, he would be called a traitor. Then, in August, the news came. Hiroshima, August 6th, Nagasaki, August 9th, surrender, August 15th. The camp fell silent. Men sat on their bunks, staring at walls. Some wept. Others clenched their fists, shaking with rage or grief or both. A few refused to believe it. Propaganda, they insisted. The emperor would never surrender. But the emperor had surrendered. His voice had been broadcast on Japanese radio for the first time in history. The war was over. Tanaka felt only numbness. His mother had been in Hiroshima. He would never know if she survived. The guards did not celebrate. They continued the routine, meals, roll calls, work details. The steadiness was unbearable. Preparations for repatriation began in October. Red Cross officials distributed clean uniforms. Medical examinations were conducted. Lists were compiled. Ships were scheduled. The day of departure arrived quietly. Prisoners filed out of the barracks carrying small bundles. Some clutched wooden carvings they had made during free hours. Others held letters they had written but never sent. As Tanaka passed through the gates of Camp McCoy for the last time, he paused and looked back. The barracks, the mess hall, the guard tower where Miller used to stand. He felt no fondness, but he felt something: confusion, gratitude, shame, all tangled together in his chest. He had expected cruelty. He had received hamburgers. The journey home was long. The ship was crowded. The Pacific stretched gray and endless in every direction. Men huddled together in silence, wondering what awaited them. When Tanaka finally stepped onto Japanese soil in November 1945, the world he knew was gone. Cities were ash. Families were scattered. Hunger was worse than anything he had experienced during the war. His mother had not survived Hiroshima. He learned that from a neighbor 3 days after his return. There was nothing left of her, nothing to bury. For weeks, Tanaka did not speak. He worked in the rubble, clearing debris, stacking bricks, rebuilding walls that would never hold the same memories. At night, he lay on a thin mat and stared at the ceiling, just as he had in Wisconsin. One evening, a child approached him on the street. A boy, maybe 6 years old, thin, eyes too large for his face. He held out his hand. "Do you have food?" Tanaka reached into his pocket. He still had one piece of chocolate saved from the camp canteen. He had carried it across the ocean. He didn't know why. He unwrapped it slowly and placed it in the boy's palm. The child's eyes went wide. He bit into it, savoring the sweetness, and smiled. Tanaka watched him. And for the first time since his return, he felt something other than emptiness. Years later, when his own son asked about the war, Tanaka spoke carefully. He did not mention the battles. He did not mention the shame. He spoke only of the food. "I learned in America," he said quietly, "that kindness is harder to carry than cruelty. Cruelty you can fight. Kindness you remember." His son did not understand. Tanaka did not explain further. Some truths cannot be taught. They must be tasted. The statistics tell part of the story. Between 1942 and 1946, the United States held approximately 5,000 Japanese prisoners of war in camps across the continental United States: Camp McCoy in Wisconsin, Camp Clarinda in Iowa, Camp Huntsville in Texas. The prisoners received the same rations as American soldiers: 3,500 calories per day, meat, vegetables, bread, coffee, sugar. Many gained 20 to 30 pounds during their captivity. The Geneva Convention required humane treatment. The United States chose to exceed those requirements, not from sentiment, but from strategy. Well-fed prisoners provided better intelligence. They were easier to manage, and their letters home, describing American abundance, served as psychological warfare against Japanese morale. But the men who lived through it carried different lessons. They returned to a devastated Japan with memories they couldn't reconcile. Memories of hamburgers and Coca-Cola, of guards who showed photographs of their families, of doctors who filled cavities and dressed wounds, of an enemy that treated prisoners better than their own army had treated them. Some spoke of these experiences cautiously, voices trembling between guilt and gratitude. Others buried them deep, sealed behind silence and pride. But none forgot. Because in the end, war strips men of everything: rank, reason, hope. But it cannot erase the power of small acts. A hamburger shared across enemy lines, a bottle of soda passed to a starving man, a guard showing faded photographs through a fence, a piece of chocolate given to a child. Moments so small they could have been lost to time, and yet they endure. because these gestures, born in the shadows of conflict, remind us that mercy can survive where hatred tries to rule. These are the moments that outlast the noise of artillery and the silence that follows. These are the moments that remind us we are still human. If this story moved you the way it moved us, hit that like button. Every like tells YouTube to share this with more people who need to hear it. Subscribe and turn on notifications. We're pulling these forgotten stories from archives every single day. Stories about ordinary men caught in extraordinary circumstances. Real people, real choices, real humanity. Drop a comment and tell us where you're watching from. United States, United Kingdom, Japan, Australia. Our community stretches across the world. You're not just watching, you're part of keeping these memories alive. Thank you for being here, and thank you for making sure these voices from 1944 don't disappear into silence. These men deserve to be remembered, and you're helping make that happen.